Today's episode of the Ringer NBA Show is brought to you by Hulu. Did you know Hulu has live sports? Watch your favorite teams and the biggest games all season with no cable or satellite subscription required. Get over 60 live and on-demand channels, tons of shows and movies, and watch on the go on your favorite devices with Hulu, plus live TV. Learn more at hulu.com.
Basketball is very good. The Wizards underpaid John Wall. AD should re-sign with the Pelicans. The Nets actually won the Celtics trade. Basketball is very good.
Hello and welcome to the Ringer NBA Show. This is the group chat. Joining me today, as always, Haley O'Shaughnessy.
Hello.
Paolo Uggetti.
What's up?
I'm Justin Verrier. Bobby Wagner is here as well. Haley, you wanted to start the show off right.
There are a couple things I said before the show that I know we can't say now, so don't tempt me.
Guys, when you were discussing Chris Ryan on email, what do you refer him as? To him as?
It's a great question.
Is it balls? We are, of course, referring to the Los Angeles Times report that came out this morning that a couple Lakers people, Jeannie Buss in particular, and some of the business people, I believe one is with MSG, refers to Steve Ballmer, the owner of the Clippers, as balls.
With a Z.
With a Z.
With a Z, that's important.
But sometimes S. But I agree with you that the Z is important because balls with an S insinuates it's just kind of like a regular nickname. The Z is like we're clearly
making fun of him.
We're making fun of him.
Yeah.
Would it be better if it was just with an S? Like what you know what I'm saying? Because like then it would look kind of weird too. Because it just says balls, you know?
That's true. The literal definition does come into play in that regard.
Yeah.
So you don't refer to Chris as
all right,
balls.
starting our I want to read one particular quote. So these are this came in an email that was sent to another person. This is from Jeannie. Quote, "Didn't balls see what we did to my brother? Question mark, question mark. What a gangster movie this is turning into."
Yeah.
Like that gave me Town vibes. I just got chills.
Yeah. And now on the other side of things, it does seem like based on some of the reporting and the whispers that are happening that Ballmer and I guess the state of California, whoever would be involved in this, sold the lot across from the Forum to Ballmer, I think, and they told James Dolan, who owns the Forum, or the MSG company that owns the Forum, that they wouldn't turn it into something that would be a direct competitor. It turns out that they want to build a stadium there that's a direct competitor to all the music interests that Dolan wants to put into the Forum or already has. And so there is a lot of shady things going on both sides. But I have to say, seeing it play out via email is quite incredible.
Seeing the punctuation being sent from my iPhone makes it even like 10 times better.
Oh yeah.
Because it's like, oh, these people were just like, just texting on their iPhone and basically like deciding or talking about other franchises in such a manner. And like, not to be like, I'm not trying to sound naive here because I'm sure this happens all the time in so many different forms, but to have it come out in this way, to punctuate a season that has just been from hell for the Lakers is just something else.
Yes. I think Kevin Arvis wrote a very good piece on ESPN recently that the Lakers just don't really have a good self-awareness, I guess is the best way to put it. They still operate as if they are the Lakers dynasty of the 80s, and very clearly they are not. As we've seen, our guy Ivica Zubac, as our friend Jovan Bua pointed out today in his lead, that they fleeced the Lakers for what it turns out is a pretty capable starting center.
Yeah.
Which I think is really interesting. All right, let's get to the actual show here, unless anyone else has any more balls talk they want to get into.
Balls.
So the playoffs are coming up here, and this is kind of the theme of the show, so it really fits. We're just kind of we're still thinking about a lot of things happening in the league that just might not happen right away. I think the biggest one, believe it or not, even still they're out of the playoffs, but the Lakers still fascinate me to this day. If only because I've been trying to think about what the Lakers do from here, which I guess is what everybody in the league is trying to figure out, including the Lakers. And I was racking my brain and I'm trying to figure out the math. And I just don't see how anything works via trade anymore, which feels pretty significant. And it doesn't feel like people are talking about this enough. So the big things, obviously, are both Brandon Ingram and Lonzo Ball were shut down for the rest of the season. Lonzo Ball seemed to be just the continuation of the injury that afflicted him over the past month or two of the season. could have sworn I saw a report or listened to a podcast in which they said that Lonzo probably could have come back if there was something to play for. It wasn't like super serious. Do you believe that?
Yeah, if they were still going for the playoffs, I would assume that they would make a stronger push for him to get back on the court. But I don't know. It seemed like from the reporting, it seemed like the ankle turned out to be worse than it was in terms of and like that raises a lot of question about why that wasn't diagnosed in the first place. But whatever, right? I just don't think now. Obviously, it's not even worth it to try and bring him back at all.
I think that Lonzo and then LeBron's minutes restriction and the news that he's probably not going to play in the second half of back-to-backs is much more of a waving a white flag after the news of Brandon Ingram, because that's serious.
Right. Yeah. So Brandon Ingram, it was found that he had a blood clot in his shoulder. It's called DVT. I'm not totally sure what that means on a medical level, but basically it's pretty serious. Blood clots have shown up pretty recently. Mirza Teletovic, I believe his career was ended as a result of that. Chris Bosh is probably the most significant example of that. Now you've seen people say that those happen in their legs, which is different than their arms. And I read something recently, I forgot the source, so I apologize, but basically it helps specifically because of like basketball players are shooting in the shooting motion for some reason. It's like blood clotting is not as bad. Yeah. So I guess the big takeaway there is both Lonzo Ball and Brandon Ingram are not going to finish the season, and both of them go into a pretty critical offseason for the Lakers with injury concerns. The big thing here is that clearly both Ingram and Ball are their biggest trade assets.
I don't know if I would say Lonzo is a big injury concern.
I think he didn't finish both of his 2 seasons.
He's had both seasons have cut off like a good bit.
That's true. So I thought you meant in this particular injury, but actually you're right. In the entirety of his career, that is.
Yeah, the injury itself, I don't know what will happen going forward, but he has been injury prone. Does seem like he's a bit, I don't want to call him frail, but like his frame just doesn't seem like it would like it's good for
He's
that.
always had like a high school boy's body.
Right. I mean, he hasn't had a full summer to sort of work on getting like fully stronger, because last summer he had the knee injury as well. And again, injury. So that's a little problematic.
Right. And in the offseason, I think a lot of teams will just raise any sort of shred of doubt about a player in order to diminish their value.
Sure.
So they are ostensibly their biggest routes to getting a star player via trade. And also, the one thing that I was looking at is they're the 2 biggest salaries on the Lakers' books going forward outside of LeBron.
That's insane.
Yeah.
And so now you're stuck in this situation where...
That's crazy. They're both on their rookie contracts.
Right. It's LeBron and then the rookie contracts.
Which in that sense, you're kind of like, okay, so the Lakers, like the 1-year contracts that they all signed turned out horribly and didn't really offer much support. But now that they're going into the offseason clean, it seems in retrospect not as bad.
Yeah. And
I guess now that we've accepted that they're not making the playoffs, everything kind of seems not as bad. Just in terms of what they did for this season.
But the thing is, like, they could trade those guys because they were bigger contracts, right? Like, you know what I'm saying? Like in the middle of the season.
Right. I guess what I'm driving toward here is you have your 2 biggest chips are now diminished in terms of value, presumably. And at the same time, if you need to do anything on the trade market, you need to trade them, because the only other option you have is to loop guys in on sign-in trades. But that becomes particularly difficult because they can go anywhere they want. And so a guy like Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, he has a $12 million deal, and so maybe he would do it. He would agree to be in the sign-in trade somewhere else for them to get like an Anthony Davis in order to get that raise. But at the same time, he has to agree to go to the New Orleans Pelicans at a time when they're just rebuilding. And New Orleans Pelicans have to agree to pay him to an exorbitant salary in order to make all of this work.
I'd be shocked if they engage in trade talks with the Lakers.
The Pelicans do?
Yeah, going forward. Would you?
Well, they need leverage. They need to they need bidders this summer for sure.
Yeah, I could see them definitely looping them back into the mix. But I guess I'm wondering, like, how does a deal even get struck between them? Because the package going back to the Pelicans looks worse than ever.
Yeah.
2 weeks ago, it looked like it was going to be better because Ingram was starting to show sort of signs of being that number 2 pick again. And maybe he ultimately becomes that. But are you really going to trade for something where the centerpiece is a guy that, like, there's a non-zero possibility that he won't be able to play like in his career.
Yeah.
Well, let's play devil's advocate and say that they decide that they aren't going to trade Davis.
Mm-hmm.
He's not the kind of player who's going to sit out. And honestly, like for the length of his contract that's remaining, he can't afford it in his career. He needs to play the next 2 years. He can't just sit them out.
So you're saying Davis has to go somewhere this summer?
No, what I'm saying is that he would not sit out. He's not the type to sit out, I don't think, if they were like, look, we're not trading you. Sorry.
Yeah. It seems really complicated going forward. Let's talk about the Lakers just specifically before we get on to the Davis thing, because I do want to talk about that. What happens? Like,
yeah.
Are there any other options here that I'm just like missing?
So obviously, though, the option is to, and really the plan is to trade for a superstar and then sign another in free agency.
Mm-hmm.
But as the year has gone on, you get more of these sort of certainties, if you will, as much as you can get them before actual free agency of like, oh, well, if KD leaves the Warriors, he's not going to LA. Like if Kyrie leaves the Celtics, he's probably not going to LA. Like, and then you start going, if Kawhi leaves Toronto, he's probably not going to the Lakers specifically.
Yeah, and the Clippers are operating very much like Kawhi is basically there.
Yeah, exactly. And
so is Vegas.
Right.
Sure.
So you start seeing these options sort of fall off the board, and I'm with you. I just don't see what they do. Like, they're probably going to end up with like what, Jimmy Butler? I don't know how you feel about that. If they can get like Jimmy Butler and then somehow still trade for Davis or wait until he becomes a free agent and then sign him, which is another sort of like black hole to dive into. Like, I guess that turns out okay. But
Jimmy Butler is worst case scenario for a star that they could sign.
100%. Like Chris Middleton would probably work better next to LeBron than Jimmy Butler at this point.
Yeah, and I think that's what you're looking at here, because it doesn't seem like the trade route is all that viable. I started even looking at guys who come up in 2021 just to see if like maybe one of them would pull a Kyrie and start to force their way out. The pickings are pretty slim. It's Giannis, who, I mean, why would you leave pretty much the best team in the league right now? Bradley Beal, definitely an option. I could definitely see that happening at some point, although the Wizards are kind of turning the keys over to him, and he's going to have pretty much... I mean, he's going to have the team to himself in Washington.
And he said before he's not the kind of person to ever like force a trade.
Right.
He doesn't believe in player team creation. So that would have to entirely be on the Washington front office to decide that they want to completely start over.
Yeah.
And I just can't see them doing that. They held on to that big three through so much and then finally decided to let one piece of it go. And the two pieces you have left, you really only have one. We don't know what John Wall is, but his stock has completely just plummeted.
As a quick aside, do you think we're going to get to a point where like scouting reports have that now, where it's like, is this guy a pro player team creation here, or is he more of a like do it yourself kind of like, hey,
I wouldn't be surprised
I'm kind of joking, but it's also like very exactly like
they look at makeup, and the more that I hear from people around the league is that digging into some of those personality, I guess, scouting reports is definitely more of a thing. I know that like one team in particular actually researches how certain guys play together, and not only in terms of matching lineups, but in terms of like filling out their roster. So, and now you're seeing guys like Lee Jenkins go to the Clippers, and one of the big things that we've heard from there is just that he knows the right guys for some of these superstars. So if you want to get in with those superstars and know those superstars, well, Lee has direct experience with tracking down the guys closest to them.
Yeah.
So I do think that is the case.
Right.
Do we believe Bradley Beal when he say that he's not going to like create a super team?
I would if he,
well, he didn't say he wouldn't create one in Washington, but he begrudgingly...
He wouldn't go to one?
He said he wouldn't go. He said before All-Star begrudgingly that he was like, well, I guess I have to recruit. I've never been in this position before, and I don't really like how the league is trending, but I have to do it. That's what you have to do to win.
Bradley Beal strikes me...
How successful he'll be is like a different
He strikes me as somebody who just literally wants to play basketball and doesn't care like about much of anything else. Like, I don't want to like diminish his like, interest or whatever, but like it honestly seems like he's just fine playing basketball. Which like,
plus guys who are outspoken about that in that way, there's a way of like walking around it. We've seen Karl Anthony Towns do it, and even Anthony Davis do it, like saying that they want to stay and I think even Giannis had a quote like this, where it's basically like, no, I want to stay here, but like things have to go right.
Yeah.
They've all had quotes that kind of say that. Like, I'm definitely paraphrasing, and it was not that blunt.
Mhm.
Whereas the guys like Bradley Beal, Russell Westbrook, DeMar DeRozan are guys who have outright said, no, like, I don't believe in that. And they don't talk about doing what's best for them.
Yeah. I could definitely see a situation in which Beal starts to get frustrated because Wall is out for an entire calendar year. And you look around the rest of the team.
Isn't that preferable for him? I'm serious. Like, I genuinely think that he enjoys playing more without him. He's more successful without him statistically. He looks like he's having more fun playing without him.
Yeah, I agree. I think individually it's way better for him. But in terms of just like success, I don't know like what they have around Beal at this point to even compete.
If they don't do anything this summer, then that's a huge disappointment.
And they have a lot of free agents they're in the starting lineup. I'm looking at it right now. Trevor Ariza, I believe, is a free agent. Bobby Portis, I believe, is a free agent. Sadaransky, I think, is a restricted maybe or just a regular free agent. Thomas Bryant, our guy, is just plugging along. I think he had 21 and 10 last night.
Incredible. Just
off the bench.
Double machine. I mean, Lakers could use him.
It's pretty much going to be Brad and Jabari Parker. So I guess that's a long way of saying that I think there's a situation where Bradley Beal could be the next frustrated star. Just the rest of the list is Damian Lillard, who is getting up there in age, but I don't see him doing it. Just the same point you were making
Lillard
about
has the same
Beal.
kind of
It's the same kind of vibe as
outlook
that
as
Beal is like
Beal.
at least giving off right now.
Also,
Right.
Portland's very good.
Yeah,
way
Portland's
better than
good.
the Lakers.
Right.
Drew
Lillard
Holiday.
and LeBron is actually a team that that's something I would sign up for.
Yeah.
That's a good pairing.
And it sounds like LeBron is a fan. And Victor Oladipo, who's coming off an injury. So we don't know where we get there. It seems like the Lakers, at least their core, is what they are. Like going forward next year, I'm at this point, like there are things that happen that we just don't foresee. Porzingis going to Dallas being a shining example of this. I don't see how the Lakers right now change themselves all that much besides just like adding one player on top of it.
The one thing I would say is maybe LeBron turns on recruiting mode and like goes to Kyrie and Kawhi and maybe even KD and is like, hey, like, and like really sells them on it because he knows he has to. Like that's the only thing I could see that could sort of flip this around. And I for one, I'm like not going to doubt LeBron is capable of that, but at the same time, it does look pretty bleak.
And do we think that there's one guy in particular that would do that? I mean, Kyrie
would
makes
100% be the guy to do that.
Lately, lately
Yeah.
it seems like, and when they recently played, when the Lakers played the Celtics, they had that. They did their old handshake after the game, and then they did the jersey thing where they talk forever.
Yeah,
I always
love
think
that.
it looks like they just think something really smells.
Yeah, or
For
like,
like
they're,
15 seconds on the
burping.
broadcast.
Paolo is miming this for us right now.
Exactly.
Thank you for committing to the bit.
LeBron, like he does that often with players, but actually, like I think back to when he did it with Lonzo
Yeah.
before he went to the Lakers, before AD requested his trade. So
Oh, you think this is a telltale? This is like a
This
poker
is,
tell.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
just
It's just
saying,
like rounders. It's like the
it's
Oreo.
a good sign. I also I don't know why they feel the need to do that. Like if you must have such a not close relationship that you can't just like text them to hang out after.
That's the thing I always wonder
You're
about.
like
Like,
a
what do they
room
actually
away?
have to talk
No,
about?
It's all about the showmanship, guys. Come on, like it's about like
This
being
is
in front
how
of the
I know
cameras.
that LeBron is messy and loves drama. And that's why I know
Yeah,
he'd be really good
100%.
friends.
Like it's about being in front of the cameras and like letting everybody know, oh, we're talking, but we don't want everybody else out there to know what we're talking about, or like
Yeah, because
really
what
to
could he
prevent the
seriously be
lip
saying?
readers.
Like, hey, have you ever thought about coming to the Lakers? Like after the game, and Kyrie's like, that's crazy. I have thought about it. Like he's just saying, like,
they're
good
probably
game.
just talking about like where they're gonna go to dinner after.
Yeah, it's like,
Yeah.
what were you thinking? Steak?
Yeah,
Pizza?
Chinese.
So I don't know. I'm just confounded by this entire situation. Just to go over some of like the free agent options, it gets pretty bleak after.
So
the
hold on,
Butler.
I just want to say this before you list those because that will put those in this context. I think that their best case scenario, if they are going to trade Lonzo and Ingram, is to trade them for the kind of like filled out roster of role players that we see like on the Clippers now, and then to sign a star. I don't think they're going to pull off 2 stars.
So
Wow.
similar to what the Cavs did in that last LeBron season, but just like better players, just high value role players.
Right, because those two packaged together, I mean, Ingram, that's the thing is like, the Pelicans might be worried about the blood clots, and like they should be worried about the blood clots and Ball's injury history. Other teams that are just giving up role players might be more willing.
Yeah.
High caliber role players.
I mean, if you really want to sort of commit to the LeBron window like hard, then you go and maybe go for like a Mike Conley in a trade. You know what I'm saying? Because he's going to be
that's interesting.
Right.
You know?
I like that.
Right. And like that would be fun because Conley is a great point guard who
and I
think
guess I
would fit
should
well
include him
along
in stars,
LeBron.
but that's kind of what I meant.
Yeah.
I meant a guy who you wouldn't think, like not the
Right.
flashy names that we're about to bring
Yeah,
up.
like sort of, come up with a package for Conley and because the Grizzlies are going to deal him. It sounds like sooner rather than later. So I don't know. That's maybe an option. Then you go sign again. Maybe you end up with Jimmy Butler, Mike Conley, and LeBron. Not terrible.
It definitely commits to a certain window.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like you
Which
really
is
have
his
to.
window. There's
that's the
only one window. That's the thing. The
yeah.
Lakers don't have an option for another window because they chose a person as their franchise for the next 4 years.
Right.
So this is their window.
That's the problem. Yeah, they're balancing identities, and that's why the season sort of. I mean,
right, because they don't have. They realize they don't have time anymore for Ball and Ingram to catch up, and it seemed like Ingram was actually going to catch up, which is kind of unfortunate.
Yeah.
I mean,
I think you try to keep him.
for-
I think at this point, like I don't know what you could get for him given the situation. I think you probably try to keep him, and then maybe try to deal with the other guys.
Right.
Yeah. And I probably should have said this at the jump, but like it gets a little gross when we're talking about Ingram. Like, is he diminished simply because of disease? But like, I mean, this is a reality that the Lakers have to face at this point. But we all wish for the best for young Brandon.
Oh yeah, of
That-
course.
that
It
would-
was scary.
Yeah.
But tangential to that discussion is obviously the AD thing, which Haley, you were getting at earlier. Again, where is he going? I think I think there are a lot more options, but it does feel like we're in this place where we settled on this reality based on the fallout of the trade deadline. And now I'm starting to rethink it. And I'm like, wait, how does this, and this happen? And now if Kyrie leaves Boston and goes to New York or goes to the Lakers,
This seems inevitable.
which seems likely at this point.
It
Although
doesn't seem like I don't know why the franchise would want him back. I don't know why he would want to go back.
I still think the East is at a point where we're not 100% sure of any team, and thus, like if the Celtics get to the finals, and like I don't think they can obviously beat the Warriors, but if they sort of give them a tough series, like I could see like Kyrie being like, okay, like
With some
I'll
postseason
say,
success.
like
there's a
maybe
lot
it's
to
in
be
play.
decided
Yeah,
here.
for
And,
sure.
and like guys have definitely been wooed back based on playoff success and all this other stuff. Yeah. So I should say we don't know what's going to happen with Kyrie, but let's just assume that he ends up leaving. So the Lakers are functionally out, I think. Because of all like the clash between the front offices and as like we just kind of talked about with Lonzo and Ingram, would the Celtics be willing to deal Tatum at that point, knowing that you would really only have AD and whatever you can kind of cobble
They
together?
shouldn't. They definitely shouldn't.
Right?
Because think about it, with
What if that
Kyrie
helps you keep
Irving and the
Kyrie?
Gordon Hayward that they traded for, they are a win now team. They are a right now, this is what we have team. Not anymore. That's if Kyrie leaves and Gordon Hayward is this, no. Like you have AD. Then I would keep Tatum.
And now they've been lusting after AD for years.
Yeah.
And I don't think they've really veiled that all that much.
No.
So maybe they're just like, this guy's just too good. We just want him in our system and we'll figure it out later.
Okay, I'll add an addendum. I would not just get AD. They'd have to have something else coming in.
Yeah.
I mean, yes and no. Like I think a team. Or are you saying in this scenario Kyrie leaves?
Yes. With Kyrie gone.
Yeah, that's obviously a huge risk. Yeah.
And we don't know if Horford's going to come back. He has a player option.
Right.
So it'd be AD, let's just say theoretically AD, Horford maybe. You'd probably keep Jalen. You'd probably bring back Rozier if you didn't have to trade him.
Probably.
That's still a good team. It reminds me of like you would essentially switch from we're building a dynasty to we're doing the Masai Kawhi move of let's get him into our program and then maybe we convince him to stay.
And then if he leaves, I mean, well, I guess that's the thing, right? Is if you're sending Tatum, then it becomes like a weird sort of like half rebuild that you have left of like a couple young guys like Jalen, well, just Jalen really, and then like Rozier and Smart and this kind of band of other guys.
I think that's why the AD trade just depends on so many things. It depends on if he is sincere when he said that he was open to other teams. Would he give a verbal commitment to another franchise? Would he give a soft verbal commitment? Would he say, like, I'll at least give you guys a chance? And honestly, like, their ownership kind of has to play into this too. Like, it's, Justin, you know more about this than me because you covered the beat for so long, but their change in ownership, and then it seems like they've had some issues within that family. It just seems like ownership also might have a lot to do with their willingness to trade to the Lakers.
Yeah, and the thing you hear from there is just one thing is it seems like it's galvanized the fan base to really push back on the Lakers in the way that they have, and I don't know if you want to kind of wash away the goodwill that's come as a result of that. As we talked plenty of times at this point, that they've had difficulties kind of building a fan base from in that market. I think just I know Tom Benson in particular was a bit. I don't want to say hot-headed, but, you know, he could run hot a little bit. And in business negotiations specifically, he was known as being cutthroat. I don't really have a good read on Gale. I would assume, based on how everything is played out, the way that Clutch is kind of strong-armed the organization, how a lot of the executives come from the football side of things, and they don't really take kindly to that in football. I would assume that they would want to get rid of him regardless.
Yeah.
But you're seeing this momentum here, and I think this is what we're kind of getting at here. Is there a route where they just re-sign him? Because if the Celtics are out and the Lakers are out, you're starting to get into a situation where you're in Kawhi territory, essentially, where unless a team really wants to bowl you over and you just need to get rid of him, what if you just kept him in-house, said to him, with all this cap space that we have, pick any guy on this list that you want. We'll bring him here. And it's you, Drew, and let's say Jimmy Butler.
Even if he doesn't resign.
I love that team. I would.
That's a fun team.
Even if he doesn't resign, they have so much time to then trade him.
Yeah, he doesn't even have to commit long term. He just needs to commit for the season.
It is too.
What a finish to this entire shit show that would be.
I don't think this is completely unrealistic either. I was thinking about this too because you're not going to tell a player in his prime, okay, well, you have to stay here. So what? You're going to sit the next 2 years? There's no way. He's not going to give up 2 years.
And there's precedent here is the thing that I'm driving toward. Because Dwight Howard was basically a Brooklyn Net. And the story goes that he was telling his teammates on the team plane that he was ready to leave, that the trade was basically finalized. But everyone was getting along and they had his favorite candies or whatever that story is. Yeah. And he ended up staying. Now, he didn't stay long term. He ended up going the following year to the Lakers.
And AD does seem very impressionable.
And that's the thing.
He seems very impressionable.
The thing I hear about AD is there's definitely a lot of Dwight in him. And I don't think he's a bad guy. I don't mean to cast him in that light. I think if anything, everyone will talk about what a sweet, gentle person he is. But I just think he is so far in over his head that he's saying all these things in interviews. He's making himself look like the villain. He's listening to LeBron. He's listening to Clutch. I just don't think that he's really. I just don't think he has the experience, quite frankly, life experience or just the experience in this business in the spotlight against some of these harsh criticisms that he's facing. That he's thinking clearly. Right.
The image backfire could really affect him.
And that was one of the big driving forces you saw in him going to Clutch to begin with, because he saw, or people around him, in particular his father, who is a big personality, they saw Giannis getting these shoe deals with Nike and getting love from Nike. They thought that he didn't get the same shine. He wasn't getting cast in Space Jam 2, maybe. But
coded property.
It just seems it seems like he might be able to be swayed. I don't know.
Man, I don't know. That would be crazy. It would be hilarious for one. But also just I just don't see it because I don't think he would ever, he's so far in one direction. He's already committed so hard to that one path of getting out of there that I don't think that, like you said, maybe the people who are influencing him would let him even sort of go down that other
well, right. That's the point. He's already working with Clutch Sports, which means he's working with LeBron already.
Mm-hmm.
He's in the same
like network, if
He's
you
in
will.
the same network as him. Exactly.
Sure.
So yeah, exactly what you're saying, Paolo. They might be in such close proximity to him that they wouldn't.
He's in too deep.
He's in too deep. He's off
Guys,
the deep end.
It's never too late to say you're sorry. It's the one thing I've learned about the NBA in 10 years. No, but I don't think. I think there's a non-zero possibility that he could end up staying. Just given what I know about him and just the situation that's playing out. But if not the Pelicans, who?
Right, we have to think about the tricky teams that kind of sneak up and pull these trades when we don't expect it, that aren't the Celtics, which is like, the Thunder.
Sure.
The Raptors.
Mm-hmm.
The Spurs.
Spurs, that's one that I have listed there.
Spurs would be fun.
I
would enjoy that.
And if Danny Ferry is still in charge, he has a long history with the Spurs organization. It's a little difficult to come up with like the proper contracts to match because the two guys you would probably be looking to move are DeMar and Aldridge. And DeMar is, I think, 29, and I think Aldridge is 33. So it doesn't really fit. But I guess if you wanted to hard reboot immediately, you basically just do what the Spurs did with Kawhi. You bring in DeMar and like a prospect, and all of a sudden you go forward with that and Drew.
Knicks straight up for Mitchell Robinson.
See, I think he's untouchable.
Oh yeah. I forgot.
According to James Dolan, as he was reading, did you watch this clip of Dolan on I think it was WFAN or no, it was the other one, whatever station, I don't know, New York. But he was talking about like the guys on his team that have so much promise, but they do that thing where they have the video on the podcast, like I was going to call it a podcast on the radio segment being filmed. And he's like, he's reading off a paper. It's like, oh, Mitchell Robinson and Kevin Knox.
Robinson listing off like block percentages and all this.
He definitely had no idea who Kevin Knox was until that day.
That's worrisome.
But
the Knicks would be great. Like if they're gonna end up with at least Durant, again, it goes like to this concept of like the window shifting, right? Where you have a young team right now, you're not sure what the identity of the team is or whatever. But once you get a star like that, you push the window forward, like to now, and that causes stress on the young, like we've seen with the Lakers, on the young guys. So might as well double down on that and see if you can package those young guys for somebody else.
Right. And they do have a good collection of these young guys. The Knicks do. They have Knox. They have Dennis Smith Jr. They have Ntilikina. They have
good.
Yeah.
Well, it's about as good as
They had a good young guy.
Yeah, it's about as good as
Dallas.
the Lakers if you're considering that all the potential risk involved there now, and probably not as good as the Celtics package, even if you take Tatum off the table. But if the number one pick comes and you're willing to deal that. That's pretty damn good. That's probably the best asset on the table. Even if it's like a top 4 pick plus those guys. That's pretty good.
If it's Zion, if it's the number one pick, like the Pelicans should 100% do it.
What franchises would you guys give a pass to deal the number one pick knowing that it would be Zion Williamson?
What do you mean?
What franchises do you think it's like a legit thing for them to say, okay, like great, we're going to put this in a trade and seriously not draft him?
Well, I think this is the perfect example.
Yeah.
Would you trade Zion for Anthony Davis?
I would 100%. Like, it's not even a question to me. Like, to me, I don't think you can take something that you already know is arguably a top 5 player in the NBA and be like, oh no, we're not going to trade for that guy because we think that Zion. And yeah, like there is a chance that Zion
it depends on the team. If you're the Hawks,
it totally depends on the team.
No. Now. They're not. They don't have the timeline for.
Agreed. It totally depends on the team. I'm talking about if you're the Knicks and if you're a team that has a star already and that is pushing that window, there's no like. I'm dumbfounded by the comparisons of like, oh, you can't trade Zion for essentially the number one pick Zion for AD.
Pushing that window.
Well, if they get Kevin Durant, right? Okay. Like we all sort of expect it to happen.
Okay,
right?
No, yeah, absolutely. If they get Kevin Durant, okay.
You already know. It's not like this known quantity is some like fringe like top 20 player. It's like Anthony Davis, the top 5, arguably top 5 player in the NBA. Why would you trade that for a chance at seeing if Zion is like the next,
right?
Whatever.
It's cost certainty.
Yeah. It's just like you already know what you're getting in one area, and then what if like I think we're also working on this sort of basis that like Zion has no chance to like be a bust, which I don't think is true. Like there's very much possibility he's not as good as we're all sort of making him out to be.
I had a scout tell me before the season started that he thought RJ Barrett was going to be far superior in the league.
Well, it's just I mean the way the league is going.
It's a bad take.
I'll tell him.
That did not work out well. Yeah, I don't know. The more I think about it, like maybe the Celtics can get this done even without putting Tatum in the deal. Like I think about do you remember the first? Did you guys watch Succession?
Yes.
The first episode where what's the son's name?
Kendall
is like he can't get the deal done, and eventually he just gets really like resolute. He's like, I'm gonna stuff you so full of stock options that you're not gonna be able to, whatever. That reminds me of like the Celtics and all their draft picks.
Yeah.
We're just gonna give you so many first round picks that you cannot say no to this.
I like how Kendall is Danny Ainge in this situation. It's good.
Well, I wouldn't say that. All right, let's take a quick break, and I want to talk about actual basketball teams playing actual basketball. All right, we're back. Our producer wants us to talk about Spencer Dinwiddie for 50 minutes, I believe was his request. But we're going to rage against the establishment and talk about some deep cut teams here, specifically the Warriors and the Houston Rockets. No, so the Rockets and the Warriors played last night. The Rockets lost that game at home. I believe that was the only loss to the Warriors this season.
They almost
swept them in the season, yeah.
Pretty good.
Pretty good
for our guys. DeMarcus Cousins looked incredible at times, although
he looked incredible. He looked like so slow.
Yes, and there was even a stat last night, I believe it was ESPN Stats and Info, that was like they played at like a 91 pace when he was in the game, but like almost 100 when he was not.
It's all about variety. That's all about it. It's all about perspective. If the points are going in.
Yes, and I guess I thought two things about this. One, I thought it was a good sign that Steve Kerr was clearly leaning into DeMarcus Cousins and what he did. It reminded me a lot of the way Pop kind of changed up his offense a little bit to work LaMarcus Aldridge back in after he tried to force him to be who he wanted to be, and they had that nice little coming to Jesus moment. And they ran a lot of post ups, which Kerr doesn't often do. So on the one hand, that's good. On the other hand, it did feel like it took a conscious effort in order to work Cousins into what they do, which I wonder if Kevin Durant plays, which he didn't last night. I wonder if that's a little bit more difficult.
I think it's a situation where it's nice to have him, but that part of the game will never be their focus.
I don't know. I think Kerr likes playing that way. Like, I think we think of him as like
posting up with Cousins.
Yeah, I think there's an appeal to it that maybe, the people who are in the camp of just give the ball to Steph and let's go are not a fan of. But like, if you're thinking about Kerr as not just a coach, but a manager of people, right? It's the other side of his job. It makes sense that he uses a regular season game to sort of boost DeMarcus's confidence. Like, that's maybe all it could be.
That's a great point.
And I think that's fine. Like, that's just how the Warriors are going to have to treat the rest of the regular season, because they can't seem to get up for a lot of games. They'll always get up for the Rockets, I think, because it's just there's a thing there. And just to see Cousins sort of take on this role and show that he can still more or less have a big influence on a game is good for his confidence, and it's good for them going forward, I think, because they might come across a matchup where they're actually going to need him.
Where they need him in the playoffs. And that's what he came for, right? So that's keeping him happy. All he wants to do is showcase what he can do so he can sign a contract next summer.
Right. I will say, though, that may tie to another point where it's like, at what point is that costing the core values of your team that had taken you to these finals and whatnot? Like,
because Kerr has been reluctant, to your point, of running pick and roll with Steph and KD.
Exactly.
Because that's just not what they do. It's more of a motion ball movement offense.
Yeah. So I don't know. I maybe trying to do too many things at once, right? Trying to keep DeMarcus happy, trying to sort of fit him into the system is another process that they're taking on, and they can take it on because they have so much talent. But does that at some point get conflicting? Like, I guess that's the question we're all trying to answer.
It's a big mess. It's a big old jambalaya. Is what I would say. And going back to what we were talking about last week, that Steph quote where he was basically like, yeah, we should probably be figuring this thing out by now. I think that was really telling. And it just seems like there's still a lot of moving parts going on here. I guess the optimistic side of that is that to what Haley said, like this is why they brought DeMarcus in the first place. If he only plays against the Rockets, that's a good signing because DeMarcus was a killer against the Rockets last season. I think he tore his Achilles against the Rockets after coming off of a triple-double. Like he just has the perfect combination of heft to really kind of go at Capella without sacrificing some of the shooting and playmaking that you need. Because the Rockets are always going to be smaller than most teams.
Yeah. He's also an interesting matchup with the Thunder and Steven Adams too.
Yeah.
Just like how that is going to pan out. So there you go. Those are probably the two most threatening teams right now.
Now, my conspiracy theory is this. The Rockets sat Nene last night. And Mike D'Antoni, if you look at some of the quotes, specifically the ones from Tim McMahon's game story last night, it was basically like, yeah, we think Nene would do a good job against him. And Nene is obviously a much more physical player, a bigger player. Do you think that they rested him specifically in order to not show them what they could do against Boogie?
Yes.
Yeah.
100%. It's all a chess match with these teams now. Like, because they expect to find themselves, what?
Oh my God. And you wouldn't agree with me that it was a good idea for Ben to start shooting
No,
threes?
get the hell out of here.
Oh my God.
That is completely different.
I'm so
Oh
hurt
my
right now.
goodness. No. But
Wow,
Sorry,
I'm really
got a
hurt.
little
We're
heated
going to have
there.
to talk about this
yeah,
afterwards.
let's table it. Yeah, I mean, I could totally see them doing that. Like, we try to take so much out of these games, but really the coaches are probably like one step ahead of us and trying to sort of plan for the games that actually matter. So I could totally see that happening.
And the Rockets know that they can beat them.
Yeah.
Yes, they've already shown in the 3 games that they can kind of hang there. Well, let's talk about the Rockets briefly here.
Oh, I want to mention that Nene also didn't play the game before. So I'm with your conspiracy theory.
Ooh,
Yeah, he
I didn't
did.
look that up.
He didn't play against the Hornets.
Look at that.
Look at that.
Little research.
I love it.
So Nene,
little in the middle of the pod
information.
research.
little analytics. You can't get this everywhere.
the people on Reddit will love it that we actually looked something up for a change. So Nene, 33-year-old Nene.
No, he's 36.
Is he 36?
There's no way he's 36.
There's
no way
To
he's
undercut what we just talked about,
Analytics.
my internet wasn't working, so I just made up his age.
So if you Google Nene, some Nene Leaks comes out. I don't know who that is, but just throw that.
Celeb.
So 36-year-old Nene is the key to beating the Warriors, is what we're saying.
That's the NBA in 2019.
That's how it
You'd
goes.
love to see it.
That's kind of been like, I mean, that's honestly kind of been the Rockets season, is like finding weird ways to make players work, though.
No, you know,
Because they're not
yeah.
sure what's going to happen
It's a great point.
You know
and
what?
who's going to stay healthy.
Right. I think the actual player that is more important than everybody else is Chris Paul, who's had like a better, like he's looked really good. Watching him since he returned from the injury, he's been just very like smooth and very Chris Paul-y, if you will.
Yeah.
And it's just like, oh, like, yeah, you're really good. And it's
Yeah.
like, you almost forget about that. And I think obviously the way Game 7 ended, you know, with Paul having a hamstring injury and whatnot, like, hey, maybe that's the sort of deciding factor there.
Yes, although a distinguished NBA blogger, Jonathan Charks, would vehemently disagree with you. And I was getting into an argument with Danny Chow in the office yesterday because I agree with you, Paolo, that I think that even though Paul hasn't looked right, especially over the past couple games, I think just the breadth of like his entire game and like certain moments have been really key that show that like how important he is to this team. I thought last night was the prime example of that, where they needed a bucket late. He basically was just like, I am going to get this basket, and just buried his way down into the rim and got an and one, and all of a sudden it's a
Yeah, they
different
have
game.
2 guys that can do that.
Right.
And the fact of the matter is James Harden has a way of falling asleep in the playoffs.
Well, it's
And
not
so
even,
he may be very important. But I think we'll actually find out Chris Paul's importance when the inevitable health issues arise. He's at a certain age. He's coming off a hamstring injury. He missed 23 games this season. I don't think there's any way he stays healthy throughout the entire postseason. Or it feels good enough to stay on the court for the entirety of games.
Yeah.
Everything intensifies. I just don't see him. I just don't see this keeping up. And he's like you said, he's already not like 100% himself.
Yeah, some of the numbers have diminished. He doesn't have the same burst as he has before, but I just think there's a certain headiness that he has that just really has defined his NBA career, and it shows up in times like late in that game.
It's a nice contrast to the way Harden plays, because Harden is obviously very efficient, but he's also
he's not efficient though.
Well, in the sense that he's taking threes and close shots to the layups. Like he's a very specific type of player.
He shot like 25% over the last 10 games.
But the manner in which he plays is almost like purposefully lethargic. Whereas like Chris Paul, when you watch him play, there's like an intensity to the way he plays, and also within that intensity, a control of the game that Harden, that's not his game. So it's a nice sort of contrast to that I think would help them when the game slowed down in the playoffs.
Yeah, and I think the one thing I came away thinking about the Rockets from that game last night is just, in addition to the fact that they're hiding Nene, who's the key to their success in the NBA Finals, is just how many reliable guys they have on that roster, especially now. I think they don't have the Ariza kind of B-level guy,
sure,
but they just have a lot of solid dudes is what I would describe them as. Shump, Gerald Green, Eric Gordon, Austin Rivers.
Yeah.
They just do exactly what you need.
I would almost disagree with you with everyone on that list except for, did you say PJ Tucker?
I didn't say Tucker, but he
PJ
definitely
Tucker,
deserves
maybe
to be
Austin Rivers, but Eric Gordon's had an up and down. He's been streaky for 2 years straight now.
Mm-hmm.
I would not put Shumpert in that boat as a solid, reliable guy. And while I think that we underestimated what Gerald Green could be to the team 2 years ago when they signed him, I think that might be overestimating him a little bit. I don't think that I don't think that those are playoff guys, deep playoff guys.
I see your point. I would disagree, if only because they're just veterans who would be able to hit open shots, which is really all you need from these guys.
Yeah.
The one thing I did notice last night in particular was how much bigger the Warriors are. Good Lord, even not including Cousins, you're basically the Rockets' base lineup is 3 guards almost all the time. 4 at some points if you really want to go super small with Tucker.
Mm-hmm.
And now that's an advantage, and they played that to their advantage a lot of times, especially last season. But if you're putting Cousins in there, your front line is basically Cousins, Green, and Durant, all of whom are bigger than PJ Tucker.
Yeah.
PJ Tucker might be as big as Klay Thompson, maybe not from a growth standpoint, but just from an overall physical standpoint. They could just crush them.
Yeah, well, that's the thing I was thinking about too, while watching this game and sort of seeing what was happening is Durant is the ultimate trump card for the series, because there's probably nobody on the Rockets who can, they can probably limit him to 25, 28, but nobody is going to stop him just because of his sheer size and the way he scores. And I think that's what you see a game like last night. It's close. It ends up almost being a win for the Rockets without Durant. I think that game would be a 15-point game if Durant had played.
Yeah. And we're at this point in the season where I don't know what's real and what's not. Do we really put a lot of stock in this win? They didn't have Durant. They didn't have Nene. Dude, how much?
You're really going with that.
How much were the first 3 matchups indicative of what's going to happen, and how much is this? I think about that a lot when I'm watching these days, and I think this is kind of leading to where we all are as a basketball viewing community, where it's just does this matter?
I think the Rockets have changed more than the Warriors have, even though the Warriors have incorporated. Have incorporated Boogie, because they've had, the injury issues throughout, and then they've gone with this rotating cast of nobodies. And shout out Daniel House, who they just resigned.
Daniel House,
Congrats.
Huge justice.
He's
finally.
back.
actually, I think he is important. But.
I have to be honest. I couldn't tell you one thing about Daniel House. I know his impact on the team, just seeing him hit a 3 every so often, but if you're saying he will do this specifically, I got nothing for you.
But it's the thing you were talking about earlier. He would do that thing specifically of just being a guy around there to make shots,
and that's part of it. They just have so many of these similar types.
They do, yeah.
At this point,
and that's the thing that really could cost them. I think is that the Warriors have different ways in which they can play, as we saw last night. Whereas the Rockets, if it doesn't work out the way they play, they have to resort to what? Chris Paul mid-range jumpers. There's not really a lot of variety there.
They'll go as far as Harden will probably take them.
Yeah.
Which considering all the other options, this isn't a bad one.
I wanted to check his house's 3-point percentage because that's like his thing is 39%.
Yeah, he's a good shooter. They got a lot of solid dudes. That's the takeaway.
That's the Rockets right there. A lot of solid dudes.
Rockets, solid dudes. All right, I just want to talk about one more thing before we go here. A lot of the teams are kind of set for the playoffs. I think the last seed or the last 2 seeds in the East are pretty much up in the air. We don't know if the Magic are going to get in, if the Heat are going to get in. So get excited, Florida. But besides that, we kind of know who's in, who's not. It's really going to come down to seedings. And from that, I'm really intrigued to see if we have any upsets. I looked this up last night as I was watching Property Brothers on HGTV.
Unbelievable.
There is an average over the past 10 years.
You could be the third Property Brother.
You think so?
Wow, yeah.
You're wearing flannel right
guys.
now.
Totally
You have the beard.
What
for sure.
would my role be, though? Like, they already have the construction guy. They have the real estate
Just
guy.
pure
They have
pep.
somebody to like run their website, like just like just
Oh, yeah.
do the content.
I'm IT. They actually have a third Property Brother. Did you guys know this?
Yeah, I did
That
know that.
sucks. Can you imagine being him?
I think he's
Actually,
Can you
he
imagine
has
being trivia for your 2 famous brothers?
yeah, that's terrible.
he's like an impersonator from one of those like American Idol guys.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wait, he's an American Idol impersonator?
Yeah, like there's a specific American Idol character that I just don't know his name. But he's a guy with like kind of a
But he's
rocker
famous enough
guy.
to be impersonated.
Little yes.
Judging off a Google image search, it appears he's an Adam Lambert impersonator.
Yes, thank you, Bobby.
Wow.
There's a lot here. We need to
I
move
like
on.
that. I like that. Property Brothers,
So-
overexposed.
So we need to figure out my specific role there. But specifically
Yes.
about round 1 upsets.
Uh-huh.
How's that for transitions? Doesn't make sense. Past 10 years, there's an average of 1.9 upsets in the first round specifically. Over the past 3 years, there's just been 1. What's super interesting in a very nerdy way is that the 5 seed has upsetted the 4 seed in the West 9 out of the past 10 years, which is like interesting
Bit of a
factoid.
trend. That's very like March Madness of us right there, because we always talk about the 5 and the 12s and the 6 and the 13 and whatnot.
So based on these deeply researched findings, which was just me going through the brackets over the past 10 years, it seems like if you're the 4 seed in the Western Conference, you're probably going home. We'll see how the standings end up playing out. Right now, the Rockets are 4, and as we just kind of alluded to, we think they're pretty dangerous in the playoff series. 5 are the Portland Trailblazers. After that, it's the Spurs at 6, the Jazz at 7, the Clippers at 8. It seems like those teams are set, but they're they're within a couple games of each other, so there could be a lot of movement there.
The Thunder could also fall. They're third right now.
Thunder could definitely fall. It seems like Warriors, Nuggets are pretty set in the 1-2 spot. Next tier would probably be Thunder, Rockets, Blazers, and then Spurs, Jazz, Clippers. But again, they're all within a few games. Are there any of these teams that you think is particularly vulnerable should they end up in, like, let's say the 4th seed?
Well, Paolo, you think the Nuggets, right?
Well, the Nuggets
Well,
are not going to
they
end up in
won't
the
end up
4th
in the
seed.
4th
If we're
seed.
talking about a 4th seed team, probably
I'd say the
the
Blazers,
Blazers.
out of the Thunder and the
It hurts
Rockets.
me to say that because I enjoy them, but I think they're probably the ones with the case of like. I mean, we just literally saw that happen last year. With them playing Pelicans just getting swept. So they would probably be there. As far as overall the West, I think the Nuggets are a little, especially if. Well, it looks like it could be either the Spurs, Jazz, or the Clippers right now. I think all those teams are really solid, and for a team that has not been, most of its main players haven't been in the playoffs before. I wonder how that could go. I've been telling people, I've been toying around with the idea of predicting an upset there, like especially if it's like the Clippers or something like that, where I just think it's a team that is so deep and solid that, putting matchups aside, could give them a little trouble. But yeah, I don't know. I would say like just keep an eye on the Nuggets.
You hate the Nuggets.
No, that's the translation. Yes,
Well, they did just get rid of Isaiah Thomas from
they did.
the rotation. So perhaps
That will help.
Yes, I think there's a bit of addition by subtraction going on there. I want to believe in the Clippers. I went to their game on Monday. I thought they were just super impressive. Just Zubac, Shamit, I love. I didn't realize, because I don't really follow college basketball that closely, that he was a point guard in college. And you could definitely see it when he plays, just the way that he's always like moving the ball and getting everyone involved while still doing his JJ Redick thing. I was just blown away by that. I think the downside would be that a lot of their key players are young guys. They're functionally starting 3 rookies, if you want to say that Zubac is first. Well, Zubac is in his 3rd year, right? So 3 youngsters, essentially, 2 rookies and Zubac. And then a lot of their best players are coming off the bench.
Yeah, that's kind of, now that I think about it, it is a little backwards to say, like, to harp on the Nuggets for not having playoff experience when the Clippers are starting a few young guys who also have not had playoff experience. But I do think their bench is just ridiculous to a point where, like, that cancels some of it out.
Mm-hmm.
And the Nuggets are deep themselves, but yeah, you know, there's a certain foundation there, an identity that they already know who they are. There, you know, Lou Williams can come in and drop 20, you know, on any given night. Montrezl Harrell can be forced, you know, near the rim. So yeah, I don't know. I just think knowing who you are going to the playoffs and sort of highlighting those skills is what could make for a dangerous upset team.
Well, speaking of a team further down in the Western Conference standings that has a lot of playoff experience, there's the Jazz. I mean, they are a team that is headed by Donovan Mitchell and Rudy Gobert, who is actually 26, but they're built on veterans. Joe Ingles, Ricky Rubio, Derek Favors, Kyle Korver, Jay Crowder, and they did it last year. And they've seemed like a team that's beyond their years together, mostly because they did a really good job of incorporating Mitchell as the centerpiece and running things around him last year. And we literally saw it last year. So against a young team, they could be dangerous.
Yeah.
Especially with the way that Gobert is playing right now. That would be an interesting matchup for the Nuggets.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting. They've played a lot of point guard lists this season. You're starting to see Ricky Rubio kind of work his way back in there. He started last night. And it seemed like it had a cascading effect to where Rubio himself did not play particularly well. He was 1 for 7 from the field, which is not great going forward in terms of like that being a viable option. But you did see other guys seeming to have more because they weren't always on the ball. You could do a little bit more with your rotation. So I do think that that's a little bit of a curveball there that they could play with. And obviously the defense is always going to be there with Rubio. But the Jazz, they just, we wrote something on the site recently, Dan Devine did, that like maybe they were the sleeping giant in the NBA, just like they were last season going into the playoffs. They had just such a incredible stretch run. And it seemed like analytically that things were aligning themselves to happen again. Unfortunately, over the past few games, they've kind of struggled. They let the Suns hang in there the other night. They lost to the Pelicans. And I think like tonight's matchup against the Wolves at 6 p.m. Pacific, I think that's a really interesting one. Just because I think the Wolves have played really feisty lately. I think Karl Anthony Towns has been very good. He's starting to play like the guy we all kind of hoped he would be. I caught a lot of flack from Wolves Twitter because I called him Nikola Vucevic Ultra.
Oh man,
in our blurbs. But I mean, I've always been a fan. I've just always been disappointed because I think he's the type of talent that should be in the MVP conversation. I've been saying this all year. I think like you get the right solid guys around him. I think there's a chance that like they could be a frontline team. I think he should be competing for the MVP every year. So they're playing the Jazz tonight. All right, we're going to call that one our watch of the night. We do this once every podcast. If you want to watch every NBA game, subscribe to NBA League Pass on NBA.com or your local cable or satellite provider. All right, so any other teams that you think could be upset ready? Yeah, let's turn to the East. Let's do some Dinwiddie talk.
I fucking love the Nets.
There you go.
Haley, tell us about the Nets.
Right.
Okay, so this is actually, it's kind of sad because they have the toughest schedule going forward and seeding will depend a lot for them. I think if they can avoid the 7th or the 8th, which would mean playing the Bucks or the Raptors, they have a real chance of upsetting someone. And I even think, this is how confident I am, I even think that they would make those interesting series.
The 7 and the 8 seed series? I
The
agree.
Bucks,
I agree. Maybe not with the Bucks, but with the Raptors. I can see that.
The Nets core of, well, I mean, Dinwiddie's is a 6-man, but their 3 best scorers had not played together since November until Dinwiddie came back in late February. And Karis LeVert is still getting back into it. You know, Dinwiddie returned from thumb surgery. So him, LeVert, and D'Angelo Russell are now the unit that they can be. And while they went through all these injuries, that's not even half of it. other players on their roster that might have not been as important before came into focus and became pieces that are really, really going to help them. One of them, Crooks.
Kuruks.
I love how
One of them, Kuruks. I know.
I like pronouncing it.
Our guy Rodney.
That's incredible. Yeah.
Yes.
Roddy.
Rodney Kirks.
That actually has been a
He just
recent
turned
change.
him from like Alabama or something.
What are
Yeah.
you guys talking about?
He just turned him into like a recruit from Alabama or something.
I'm throwing it back to a previous podcast where I called him Rodney Kirks.
Oh. I was gonna say that they actually just moved him into the starting lineup, into the power forward position, and it's actually really helped one of their major issues, which is rebounding.
Mm-hmm.
So Kenny Atkinson is still toying with things, but I do think that even though they are inexperienced, I think that experience is the one thing that they're lacking for a team that could upset another team.
Yeah.
Their defense, especially over the last 5 games, including the Thunder game, has the makings of a very solid defense. Over the last 5 games, they've had the best defensive rating in the NBA. It's 95.
Jared Allen is a good defensive player. That is my take.
So what do you think about the Nets? Are you a believer?
Yeah, no, I think I agree with Haley that the 7-8 will be tough, but I do think even if they get those, we're going to watch a lot of games and be like, whoa, like this is a lot closer than maybe a lot of people expected. Because they're going to give these teams like a tough game, like just the way they play and the way they fight, if you will, it makes it so that every team has to be on their A game to I think with the Thunder game, we saw Thunder had to turn it on a little more and to get away from them. So yeah, it's a tough matchup for a lot of teams.
They have multiple guys.
I think they're the one team in the East who is the only team who's really got like upset potential.
They put a lot of pressure on teams. They play at their own pace. They really like force teams to kind of run with them. They shoot a lot of threes, so you need the team that they're playing against is going to maybe have to hit threes and also have to be able to keep up with what they could do there.
They also have a go-to finisher.
In that regard, I'm a little dubious. They have had injuries, so some of their season-long statistics aren't particularly reliable. They have a minus 0.1 point differential, which is like, it's not great. It doesn't suggest that they're like a sleeping giant or anything. I also don't truly trust D'Angelo Russell. I know he's come a long way this year, but I saw even in that Thunder game, I remember in one crucial possession, he essentially airballed it, just coming out down this court and just like jacking it. I think he has the ability to shoot them into games, but I think more often than not, he might shoot them out
the
of
young
them.
person problem.
Right.
But I do think that having LeVert and Dinwiddie there and the attitude and the aggression that they have is really good backup.
And the thing is like this is all icing on the cake of an already successful season. Just the way they played and the fact they're going to be in the playoffs even,
But hopefully they can stay in the 6th seed.
To make it interesting, yeah.
To make it interesting, yeah. But and also I checked over the last 5 games, including the Thunder loss, they've had a 95.5 defensive rating. That's insane.
It's pretty good. All right. You want to say
Pretty good podcast.
You want to say Kuruks one more time?
Kuruks.
On that note,
Christ.
for Paolo, for Haley,
Such a hater.
for Bobby, and for me.
Basketball is very good. Basketball is very good.